Cardowan. I think my father was about maybe 6 when they moved in. They were one of the first families to move in there. My dad's family, they had 12 children in the family, and they used to live in a one-bedroom apartment in the flat down at Steps Hill, and there was only one of them was born in Cardowan. So they were, they were all in that one flat. And my dad used to say they used to have a cheek to bring the cousins at the weekend, because they stayed in down at Millerston, just about a mile down the road. There's we used to call it a castle, but it's just a wee fortress, and it's still there. And his mum's sister, she was renting that, so she lived there for a while. So the two cousins would come up and they would go into the flat with them for the weekend, and the oldest daughter would be the one who babysat, and they would go down there and maybe have a drink and a wee get together, a wee sing-song. And then they moved into Cardowan when the houses were just built in Cardowan, so the Andersons were one of the first families to move in there.
My daddy always had vegetables and everything in his garden and flowers, so we were taught when we were quite young to do a bit of gardening, and we always had vegetables and all that out, potatoes, turnip, carrot, cabbage, all sorts out the garden. So,
did most of the houses have gardens back then?
Oh yeah. Most of them had big gardens, because as the more and more houses came into Cardowan, our gardens got a bit shorter. They brought the gardens down a bit. Oh well, the community was always solid, but there was everybody knew everybody. I at one point I could go along my whole street, name every single person in it, and Frankfield Road was a big road. And most of the people round about you knew as well, but you knew everybody. And we were brought up, it's like, see, your neighbours could scalp your ear and stuff like that. It wasn't like nowadays when you would get, the police would be think we'd in or something if you hit a kid, but if you'd done anything and you get seen done it and somebody scalped, you would get another scalp when you came back in. If your mum or dad, well, they must have been right enough, you know what I mean? Mrs. So-and-so wouldn't say this and Mrs. So-and-so wouldn't say that. So it's strange. We always grew up to call everybody Mrs. and still see the older, I'm 63 and still the ones that are older than me, I still call them Mrs. You know, Mrs. Nolan next door and all that. It's strange. It's how it's dead hard to sort of start calling them by their first name. It seems disrespectful, even at this age. It's weird.
So for us, it was what would have been Frankfield Play Park, and at the back of that there was a big cornfield. Unfortunately now its houses have been developed on it. We still have the play park area, but that was within view of our house, so we were allowed to go there. You would try and sneak off now and again, and there was also an old dirt track that ran down what we called was the back road, which is now identified as Frankfield Loch. And it's part of what the Seven Lochs are. But to us, it was the swamp. You know, that's what it was, because it had like this whirlwind in the middle of it that dragged all the muck and everything into it for years. Where that went to now, I don't know. But the watercourse and everything has all been changed with the buildings and what have you. But the cornfield was a great place to play. You know, you'd run through the corn, you get to the top of the hill and it was tree-lined. You know, you'd climb at the trees, you would sit there and you could see for miles. I actually believe it's the most northerly point of North Lanarkshire and the highest viewpoint, and it's now known as Cardowan Moss. So all of that space we played in, but it was never referred to as the loch or, you know, the moss. It was the cornfields, it was the swamp, you know, yeah.
We had plenty of fun. We used to go down to the old brickwork, you know, that was down near the pit. And we used to play in the fields a lot. That was our playground, you know. And we had swamps and that round about as we used to go in the days where you would collect birds' eggs and things, you know. And if you were lucky, you would be able to get a couple of eggs that you could put in the pan when we came home, you know. Man used to be sent down and she used to go to the nest and take duck eggs and things, you know. But that was for home, you know, that was to help to feed them at home. But that was just the way of life for most people then, you know. It was... I mean, it was for me. It was at the early stage of life, as I say, food was scarce, you know, money was scarce, so you just had to do what what you could bring in, you know, and if you were out getting eggs and duck eggs and that, they used to blow them into the pan rather than, you know, to keep the eggs. So that was just one of the things that we done. It was great fun.
Did anybody go rabbiting?
Yes. The maximatosis had been introduced there, I think, when I was young, and all the rabbits had died and they were all gone by that time. But I know before that was something that people did. They lived off the land more, you know.
Did people tend to grow their own?
Yes, we had a garden that my mother and father, they tended, our back garden, and they had lots of like cabbage, turnips, you know, potatoes and things in there, carrots. It was great, it was great fun, you know. The winter, I think the winter was always, it was harder. We used to, if there was cans, you know, any like tins of things, but mostly it was homemade soup, you know, it was always from, you know, anything, any rations that we could get, and we would eat like soup and bread, potatoes. You know, I was older before I knew how to cook, you know, like a roast beef and things. When I used to, you know, when I was older and married even, I would go, and if I was buying anything at the butcher's, I used to ask them, you know, what is it you do with this? How do you cook this? I'd never seen that before, never had seen a roast beef in my life. You know, I know that in Christmas we used to get a chicken. Mum used to have a chicken for Christmas dinner, and where there'd been 6 of us, you know, there was like somebody get lucky enough, get the breast, the legs, and what was left was, you know, scattered out. And we used to think that was wonderful. You know, I'd never seen a turkey being cooked until I was way up in years, you know, we just never had that.
Back then it was like, say, that where all the houses are down at the end of Frankfields, that was all fields, and it was swampy area. There was pathways down to the railway. We used to go picking raspberries and blueberries, gooseberries, all these sort of things. Years ago, I mean, when we were kids, you went out to play in the morning. In the summertime, you went out to play in the morning and you didn't come back it was starting to get dark at night. Even then, you would be sitting on the pavement where, you know, the old mother's prides made into a poke. We used to call it a poke of chips and sit on the pavement so that we could stay out just that wee while longer. If you were lucky, you get a sausage in it, maybe, or something, fish finger.
Everyone knew everyone. You know, it was, you could be out playing and you knew that you couldn't be up to no good because somebody would know who you were, whose child you were, and they would go and tell on you. So you were well behaved most of the time. Yeah, and everybody checked in on everybody. It was a very close-knit community. Most of the local families, they all worked in the local industries and things that existed here. So if you weren't friends or neighbours, you worked with each other. Your social circles were in the local social club that unfortunately doesn't exist anymore either. So yeah, it was. I had a good childhood here. What I remember of growing up, you know, it was good friends and good times. Yeah. When
we went out during the day, if we went out in the morning out to play, we would go in the fields and, you know, we'd pick up these all different leaves and things that you could look, the wee suries, we called them. We would eat them and we'd go down the back roads and we would get the berries, we would pick raspberries and brambles and everything. So we would probably forage all day. We would be eating out all day, so then when we came home, that was, you know, we would come in and we would have maybe a plate of veg soup and a slice of bread. That was it, you know.
So did you shopping daily?
Yes.
Where did you shop?
It would have been just a local shop across the road, like a wee co-op was there, and we would just go over there and, you know, get some vegetables, or, you know, when we worked in the farms a wee bit later on for me, when we were kept off, you know, for the October week, and we lived in mostly potatoes, you know. We had them always, but it was good, and it you know, it was a staple, so that was, we were used to that as well.
So did the kids go tatty picking?
Yes, yeah, I did, and my older sister did as well. But it was great fun, you know. And at night time after it, when we were finished, we used to get sent back out to what they used to say, Crow the Park. You know, we'd go out and get all the wee bullets and, you know, the other wee potatoes that was no use to the farmer. So we would get them and we'd be eating them as well in between.
I can always remember that I went to this school. This was my school. I can remember the pit buses at 3 o'clock. I can remember the pit horn and all that sort of thing. And I can remember the ice cream van with Tony down at. He was an Italian and he lived on Cumbernauld Road, the wee cafe down there, and he used to come up and sit when the miners were all coming up. They all wanted a cone when they come up the pit, and we used to always go over there with our bottles. We used to go over with our bottles and get an ice cream and or a bar of chocolate or something like that. And I can remember when we went decimal, I can remember the horror. It was like, God, how do you work this out? And all of a sudden, you were getting less for your money. You used to get 12 sweeties for a penny. What was it, 12? I think it was 12 sweeties you got for a penny, and then it turned to 3 you got for a penny or something. It made a big difference.
Yeah.
What were the local industries?
So we had Cardowan Colliery, which was the local pit. That's where my dad worked 7 days a week. And then we had what was the black and white whiskey bond at the end of the road. And then just a wee bit further along, we used to have a bus station. So it was a garage for doing the bus repairs and things like that. That was there as well. Going back a wee bit further, just from the stories that you heard growing up and things, we were surrounded by brickworks, steelworks, and like the neighbouring villages and things. So yeah, it was quite a hive of industry when we were children, yeah.
In the days, it was a case, as soon as you're out of school, you just go and work. My father's oldest sister, who was the oldest of the 12 of them, she was brought out to school when I think she was 12, and my gran had wrote to the authorities and asked that she should be come out of school because she wasn't coping with all the kids and needed, help in the house. But when she came home, it was a job that they had got for her, and it was down in the laundry lane, just down the road. It's only about half a mile from here. And she had come out of the school one day and she was in there the next day, and she was over the sinks, the big tubs, washing like hospital sheets and, all the hospital uniforms and whatever for there. And she was only 12, and they had to actually get an orange box and turn it upside down and put it at the sink for her, and that's where she got her first job.
For her to stand on?
Yeah, for her to stand on. She was small. She was too small for the sinks. But she had to do that because my gran was just needing the money in the house. My dad, he used to say to me about when they were growing up, because there were so many of them, and you can imagine, these kids all sitting round about the floor because obviously they never had the seats for them, So they'd be round the floor. And my dad said they had a table in the living room, the big round table with the chairs, and my granda used to come in for work. And my granny would put down a bit of butter in a wee dish and an onion, a raw onion, and one of these loaves, the ones that you cut yourself. So she would put that on the table, and that was his dinner. So he would sit, and my dad said that they used to sit and watch him, and he would cut a slice of bread, and he would cut a bit of onion, and he would eat it, his mug of tea, and then he would maybe take another bit, and maybe even another bit. And my dad said that they used to be sitting there, and I said, but what were you thinking? And he said, well, I used to just sit and think, for God's sake, is he going to take us? Is he not going to leave anything? Because they were all starving, so it was only when my grandfather got up for the table, what was left, they would all get a share of that, But it was hard times. It was hard times. My grandfather worked in the Parkhead Forge, and then he had another job. He used to come off, he worked their night shift, and he used to come off there, and in the morning my dad was late for school every single day, because he had to wait for my grandfather coming in, and he used to give him his boots. And my grandfather, being a man, and my father only being 8 and 9 years of age, but he had to wear the boots to school because you weren't allowed in unless you had footwear. So he used to have to go down to school with those boots on, and he was late every day.
Well, actually, I was part of the. You used to. I don't know if you know, there was a social club. It was owned by the chapel across the road, Cardowan Social Club, and I was part of the youth group. We used to have our own youth committee. So there was 10 years on the committee, and the priest and there was 2 other sort of adults used to come over and oversee it. But like say, we were all about 17, 18, 19, and we used to run. We had wee dances, we had pool, we had quizzes every week. I used to have an old record player, an old, you know, the ones you carried about. I used to take that down, and people would bring records, and we would play that. And then as we got a wee bit older, we started getting into the town, but we always went in a crowd. You know, it was boys and girls. We were all just pals, but we all went together. And that was you never left the dancing without your friends and that sort of thing. It was always kept one another safe.
My dad was a fireman down in Cardowan Colliery, yeah.
Did he have many incidents to deal with?
My dad was involved in the last explosion that happened in Cardowan, and I was in this building, in the playground when it happened, here actually where we are just now.
Did you hear it?
Yes, we heard it. We were out and all we heard was the alarms going off. And at the back of this building was the playground, and to the side of it there was big metal gates, and you could see through those gates, and that's where the pit lorries and things would go up and down, and the men would go in and out to work. And we were out playing the playground, and we didn't hear the bang that I remember, but from previous discussions after the fact and in later years, neighbours and residents did hear the bang. We might have been just too busy playing and not paying attention, but what we did hear was the alarms going off. So the first thing we all done was run to the gates to see what was going on, and before we knew it, it was just all the mums and things running up with their kids, you know, babies and things, because their men were down on shift. My dad had actually just came off shift when the explosion happened, and he went back down. He went back down. Oh, he went back down. It's a hard memory, because it was a very sore point for a community and their family. When my dad came back up, the horrors that he saw, he had his peace box, wee tin box, and he handed it to my mum and said, "Rose, I can never go back down there again." And he didn't. That was his last shift. He never went back down. What he saw and experienced, I don't know, it didn't quite destroy him, but it gave him a fear that he couldn't return to the job that he did do.
How did that affect the community?
Yeah, it was quite a tough time. But again, you know, the men were back at work before they knew it. You know, next shift, it was a different shaft. That was it. Yeah, but families were left devastated. You know, it was one of the men that was really badly burned in the explosion, and my dad helped to carry him out. He was a close family friend, you know. His mum was really friendly with my mum, you know, so it was like those families, so we were all rallying round trying to support each other. Yeah.
We were always doing things like pond dipping. We would go in at Hoggenfield Loch that had the boat when I was young. So my dad, he would take us out in their own boats, and then they had the family boat that went round the loch. And when you're a kid, I mean, the Hoggenfield Loch's like a mile radius, you know, and when you're a kid, you think you're on that boat forever. You know, you're hanging over the side and you're having such a wonderful time. And it was great, because then you would learn about the swans and about the mute swans and the hoopers, and you'd learn about all sorts of different things, you know. And some of the boys used to always try and go on the island, because that's where most of the nests were. But things are different today, that people don't do that anymore. You know, the only reason I would go for eggs now is if I was starving, you know, if my kids were hungry. But I mean, people don't do that. That's something that we've learned. But that's just sign of the times, you know, because years ago that was the thing. That was how to survive. Yeah.
What did they look like after a shift?
Oh, black. I mean, my dad, he came in, that's, I was just talking to the girls through there a minute ago about that. He didn't like getting into the showers to get showered, so my dad came home black. All he seen was the whites of his eyes. And he went in, and then, of course, my mum would get the vim out and scrub the bath after he had his bath and everything. Black. There was always soot about everywhere because you would get coal delivered to the house, and you had a bunker inside the house, and they put these wooden slats in. So it always was all over the place. And then, of course, if you had the chimneys weren't swept properly, and you would have a downpour of soot. And I can always remember that. And the houses were really, really cold. Although we had the coal fire, we were lucky, we had the coal fire, but even like if you were going to bed at night, there would be ice along the inside of your window. But my dad, he used to get a shovel of coal for the living room and take it down to the bedrooms and put a wee couple of bits of coal on it just to get a wee heat, and that took away the cold in the room. But it was very, very cold, even although you had the coal fire. Everybody sat right round it and had tartan legs and all that sort of thing. And if you had a dog, the dog used to lie in front of it, and that used to get kicked. Get out there, we want to get a heat. So.
My happiest memory, I think, is when my mum used to take she used to break into the gas meter every year. She would take the shillings out and she would take us on a bus run, and we would go here for the day. And then on the Tuesday, the man would be coming he was a gas man, he lived at the bottom of the street, so he would put the word out, I'm coming round next week to empty the meters. So therefore, when she went down to get her family allowance, she would always ask for a wee bag of, the wee roll of shillings, and she would get a padlock from the same post office, and she would put the money back in and put a wee padlock on. And the man used to laugh and say, oh, these new locks. Do you know what I mean? A wee lock, they were all shining, they were all brand new, because that was life, and that's another way I survived. But we loved it. We just thought that was great. We had wee roller streamers out the bus window, and that's what we've done. And they're my happy memories, and I love them. I wish I could go back to it. Yeah.
My next question is the miners' strike.
Yeah.
Were you aware, you were still quite young,
Yeah.
were you aware of the build-up towards the strike?
I don't think I was really aware of, all these men were going to go on strike, but when it happened, yes, I was aware that my dad was going to the picket lines, and by then my oldest brother was also a miner as well. So he was going, and he was on the picket lines with my dad, and you would hear words like scab, and you'd be like, he's a scab as a mark on, you fell and cut your knee, and you learned what that was. It was some of the men that chose to still go into work and weren't standing on those picket lines. And again, this building that we're in was utilised as a soup kitchen, but we were never allowed to come to it. My mum was too proud. My dad came and he helped. He came down and he helped out, and occasionally he would come home with tins with no labels on. It was donations that were coming from wherever they were, or some of them had maybe Russian language on it or whatever it was, so you didn't know what you were quite opening up. So I do remember him occasionally bringing a few tins and things in from what would have been like what we have now as food banks and stuff. So it was provisions to help out families, but we were never allowed to come down to have our meals here.
So your brother was striking, your dad had left by then?
Yeah.
So,
but he still supported and went to those picket lines and supported the local men and things, yeah.
So income-wise, what was it like for your family?
Poverty. Struggle, absolute struggle. We didn't ever go without. You know, we always had a meal in our belly, and, you know, we were dressed and clothed, and my mum always kept us good and that. But it was hand-me-downs, it was extended family support, you know, that it was neighbours rallying and helping each other through those difficult times.
Well, I remember the pit strikes and all that sort of thing, and I remember one of the disasters. I remember being down at the pit horn went that day, obviously, and everybody was down, looked just outside the gates, waiting the men coming up and all that sort of thing. I remember the Black and White closing down, and that's been really, the poverty here at one point was very extreme, because the mines had gone, the Black and White had gone, the steelworks up at Gartcosh had gone. So that's where everybody more or less worked. So people then had to start finding employment outside them. An awful lot of people for here have gone into the care profession. There was a lot of people moved away. Some of the miners moved away. They moved up to Kirkcaldy and different places to work in other mines. Other people just moved to get jobs. So the community broke up quite a bit, but I'm finding as I'm getting older, a lot of the younger ones are all starting to come back and live in Cardowan again, and it's quite strange. It's almost like homing pigeons are coming back home, you know what I mean?
Anne-Marie, you're a community activist.
Yeah.
I understand why, background from what you've been telling me there, but how did you get started?
Well, it kind of happened because my sister lives next to what is the last accessible green space in our community. It's at the top of Cardowan Road, and it's just always been known as the Fields in Cardowan. We now refer to it as Cardowan Community Meadow, because it's actually a really nice place to be. It's a beautiful open space. It's got lovely bits where there's beautiful wildflowers that grow in it, beautiful woodlands at the bottom. And there was a wee notice, a very small notice put in what is the Kintilloch Herald News, and it was about a proposal for the land to be developed. And someone caught sight of it and happened to speak about it in the community. And before we knew it, word was getting passed round that this land was going to be built on. So when I heard about this, it was like, as a family, we started discussing, going, oh, this is terrible, this can't happen. And because we know how much it means to the community and how much it's utilised in the community by many families for many different reasons. And so we just thought, well, we need to start trying to find out how we go about, seeing what information we can get and all the rest of it. And we did, and we found out that the developers were having a consultation with regards to this development. So we decided that we were going to attend and try and find out information and all the rest of it, which we did, and we kind of let our views be known that as a community we didn't want it. They treated us really illy. They weren't nice to us at all. So yeah, we gave them a real hard time. You know, so as a community we just gathered, and there was probably about maybe half a dozen of us, and then there was a few extended community members that were coming along and doing leaflet drops and sharing information with the rest of the residents in the community. I think we've chapped every door in this community, a dozen times or more for different reasons, and before we knew it we had absolute support from the community that it meant as much to everyone here that lived here as it did to the handful of people that we had been speaking with. So yeah, I think it was one of the most objected to proposals in North Lanarkshire in a very, very long time, because we made sure that each and every resident in this community that wanted to make representation were able to. And it was refused, and I believe that we played a really big part in that. So yeah, we're fighting hard, but Cardowan, since the pit days is gone and the industry's been stripped out, Cardowan's went downhill, really downhill. I think they started selling off the council properties and all that. Some fences started getting higher, and you know, so it made a divide within the community. Circumstances that have happened, you know, religion, all sorts of things. It's divided people. Yeah, so it's quite sad to see. But then there's still, the old community is still there. you know, in the forms of those hereditary families that still exist in the community, those that remember what has been and gone and are now living in what is the here and now. And, you know, we're still experiencing neglect and poverty and all sorts of issues here in this community. It's became more than saving that bit of land. You know, it's now about saving people's lives a wee bit here.
Well, my favourite memories of growing up was my sister stayed up in Aberfoyle, so we used to go there. That was our holiday. We went up to stay with my sister, and we were out in the fields basically with cows, and you know, you would go out with the dog and round up the cows and all that sort of thing. And that's my kind of favourite memories, and just playing. We used to go picnics with all the wee neighbourhood kids. We walked over towards Glasgow, and there would be a wee hill over there, and somebody would, if we were very lucky, we'd have a bottle of juice. Somebody would get a bottle of juice, or if not, it was just a big bottle of water, and somebody would get a packet of biscuits, somebody would get some jam sandwiches, and, you know, maybe somebody'd get a bag of sweets or something, and we used to all share, and that they were good memories. Playing in our bikes up and down Frankfield Road in the absolute boiling heat like this, and sharing your toys were all shared. Anything that you had was shared with all your neighbours and stuff like that. I think that's probably my best memories.
What are your hopes for the future of Cardowan?
Prosperity. Prosperity, that's it. A bit of peace. A bit of peace, yeah. That's it. Nothing less, nothing more. Just a bit of prosperity for this community.
I would like to see actually some of my own family coming back to live here, and to keep the community meadow thing started up during the pandemic mostly, and to see more of that happening, and for it to have better effects, and for them again more say in what should be here and what shouldn't be here. And for it to remain a safe place to live, obviously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.